sit on your bed one night and say, what's one thing I'm doing wrong, that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? You meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary. When you're trapped, some of it's your own inadequacy. What you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position. Wherever I go in the world, people come up to me and they often have a pretty rough story to relate. It's an awful thing because you see, even in the revelation of their triumph, the initial depth of their despair. So I wouldn't change that, but it's not nothing. It's certainly not just happiness. It's better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable. What could you do to improve yourself? Well, let's step backwards. The first question might be, why should you even bother improving yourself? And I think the answer to that is something like, so you don't suffer any more stupidly than you have to. Your life will be a lot different. Now, I often tell people too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial. You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do, hands down. All you have to do is do the arithmetic. The easiest thing for us to do first would just be to get you to organize your room. You think, well, is that psychotherapy? And the answer is, well, it depends on how you conceive the limits of your being. And I would say, start where you can start. If something announces itself to you, which is a strange way of thinking about it, as in need of repair, that you could repair, then, hey, fix it. You fix 100 things like that, your life will be a lot different. The question always is, why do something? Because doing nothing is easy. You just sit there and you don't do anything. That's real easy. The question is, why would you ever do anything? And the answer to that has to be because you've determined by some means that it's worthwhile. And then the next question might be, well, where should you look for worthwhile things? And one would be, well, you could consult your own temperament. And the other would be, well, you kind of look at what it is that people accrue that's valuable across the lifespan. So you do a structural analysis of the subcomponents of human existence, and already did that. You need a family, you need friends. Like, you don't need to have all these things, but you better have most of them. Family, friends, career, educational goals, plans for, time outside of work, attention to your mental and physical health, etc. That's what life is about. And if you don't have any of those things, well, then all you've got left is misery and suffering. So that's a bad deal for you. One of the immediate objects of contemplation is the fact that human beings are limited, right? There's lots of things we can't do. For example, you're there and you're not there. Then that's thrownness from a phenomenological perspective. You're just stuck with what you are. You're a certain height, you have certain eye color, you're a certain amount of attractive or not, you're verbally fluent, you're smart or you're not, or you're conscientious, and it's just sort of, those are the cards that you've been dealt. And it really is worth thinking about it that way, because who you are in some sense is a consequence of a lot of processes, genetic processes, that are in some ways random. And you've been dealt a particular hand, and then you have to play it. And that hand has limitations. And so people in some sense they're offered opportunities by the nature of how they're constituted, but there's also a tragic element to that, which is, as you move in life, you bump up against limitations that you cannot transcend. And those are the typical limitations. You bump up against the demands of the social group, which has a tyrannical element. You bump up against nature itself, because you're susceptible to illness and to degeneration and eventually to death, and so are the people around you. And so there's this issue at the bottom of being that also presents you with a problem. Life is problematic, you're trying to solve it, and that's what you're stuck with. So that's sort of the parameters of being. Much of what I said actually made me feel weak. I didn't know why exactly, but sometimes some of the things I said didn't have that effect. They weren't accompanied by a sense of shame. They weren't accompanied with a sense of vulnerability. They were solid. And at the beginning, that was probably only about 5% of what I said. The rest of it was instrumental. It was language I was using to get my way, and there was an arrogance in my use of language that had to do with the desire to attain proximal victories, right? appear smart, let's say, to win an argument, something like that. A very different idea than merely feeling my way along to see what word was appropriate for what moment. But you can learn to do that. And you can listen to yourself, and you can stop humming and hawing and using like and you know and fillers, and you can take the time necessary to craft your words carefully, and you can practice merely saying what you believe to be true. And you can read great writers, and you can write about what you think about the problems that obsess you, and you can become articulate as a consequence, and there'll be nothing about that that isn't the adventure of your life. What would your life have to look like in order for it to justify itself to you? And so why would I put it that way? Well, your life is hard. It's full of suffering. It's full of malevolence, for that matter. It's full of malevolent suffering. That's coming for sure. And that's a heavy burden to bear. And you might say, well, it's so heavy that nothing at all could possibly justify it. And I think that's not a productive attitude. I think if you watch your life, you see that there are things that will grip you that do appear to justify the weight of existence. And I think you can commune with yourself, which is a form of thought. It's a form of meditative prayer, but that's a form of thought. And the thought is, what do I want? If I could have what I wanted and needed, what would that look like? You might say, well, why would I associate thought with meditative prayer? It's like, well, what the hell do you think you're doing when you're thinking? If it isn't praying, it's the same thing. All they needed was a compelling vision. That's what we all need. We all need a compelling vision. We're visionary creatures in the literal sense. We need a compelling vision. And one of the things our society does very badly is to encourage people, is to let people know that they are visionaries and to encourage them to develop for themselves a compelling vision. It's very sad that we don't do that, especially because if you do that with people, the results are spectacular and immediate. Develop a compelling vision. You're the one who judges whether or not it's compelling. You want a vision. You want to formulate a vision such that you apprehend the vision. You think, oh my God, if I could have that, life would be worth living. Well, yeah, that's what you want. And you might find that you're actually not that hard to satisfy. That what would satisfy you, fill you with hope, stabilize you psychologically, is actually within your grasp. I can tell you one of the things that frightened me badly was the realization from reading Solzhenitsyn and a variety of other things that I was reading at the same time, that Dostoevsky as well, because he makes the same point. A human being is not only responsible for everything they do, but for everything that everyone else does. Now, that's crazy, and he was an epileptic and a mystic, and that's a crazy thing to say. But it's also, there's something about it that's true, because if you were better, the people around you would be less worse than they are.